In the 3rd century AD, Christians were still being persecuted. There was one time a very bad outbreak of plague that had taken place in a place called Carthage, North Africa. The unbelievers said that, the unbelievers were saying that the plague had broken out because their gods were unhappy with the Christians. And so the unbelievers decided that in their anger and so on, they decided that they must kill the Christians. Because if the Christians are killed, then their gods will be appeased. And so they just went on this rampage, as it were, and decided to just punish the Christians, kill many of those Christians. The mobs started killing a lot of Christians in Carthage. And at the same time, the unbelievers were also afraid of the plague, that they lost all natural feelings. When their family members, when their friends fell ill because of this plague, they just left their friends and family members to die without any care. Some of them were left sick without any care. Some of them were left to die without any care. And when they had died, their bodies were just left around, just lying around without doing anything that is needful. And as a result, the plague got worse. And at the time, although Christians were being persecuted, Bishop Cyprian, he called the Christians in Carthage together and said to them, "We are Christians. We have to be different. Although we are persecuted, although many amongst us have been put to death, but we must be different." And he said this to them. He said, "It would be no wonder if we were to attend to our own friends. Christ told us to love our enemies." And so then the bishop told them that each of them should take part in the charitable work. Those who had money were to give it. Those who had no money were to give their labor in the spirit of love. So all groups of people were set to their task gladly, without asking whether whoever they were helping were Christians or otherwise. The Christians decided they will help anybody who was in need, even though they themselves were persecuted. You see, the church history and scripture, the Bible in the Old and New Testament show us, especially the New Testament, show us that the early church excelled in care ministry. And the church in Ephesus deeply cared for the needy. They cared for the widows. But sometimes they cared for the widows to the extent that they just over-applied the divine instruction. They were just caring without thinking about whether the person really needs the care or otherwise. So the Apostle Paul was writing to Timothy, who was the pastor of the church in Ephesus. So Paul was writing to the church in Ephesus, to Timothy particularly, telling Timothy how to care for the needy wisely. And even as the needs seem to be everywhere, who qualifies for help? In what manner can we render help? These are some things that you and I must continue to think about. And so as I look at this passage, 1 Timothy chapter 5, verses 3 to 16, I'm looking at help not just to widows, but as I make the application later, I will apply it much broader to any person who is in need or any needy cause. The Apostle Paul's opening line is very important. In chapter 5, verse 3, he says, "Give proper recognition to those widows who are really in need." The term proper recognition means provide care and financial support for those who are really in need. And here he's talking about widows who are really in need. Then in verse 5, he says, "The widow who is really in need and left all alone, puts her hope in God and continues night and day to pray and to ask God for help. And so verse 5 means that she has no family to support her. So we see that simply being a widow did not qualify a person for financial support. Simply being old does not qualify a person for financial support. A widow has to be supported by the church only if she was destitute, without resources, without family to help her.